to hushed history. Tonight, we leave the familiar world behind and travel to the dense, fog-heavy forests of New England. Close your eyes, settle into the sound of the rain, and let the static of the modern world fade away. We are entering the Bennington Triangle. The air in the Green Mountains of Vermont carries a specific kind of silence. It is a place of dense timber, jagged rock, and ancient trails that seem to swallow the light even on the brightest days. But we are not here for the beauty of the wilderness. We are here for the shadows that linger between the trees and the stories of those who stepped into the brush and never stepped back out. You are listening to a chronicle of the vanished. Lean back, let the sound of the rain against the glass pull you away from the noise of the day and into the deep, damp woods of the past. The term Bennington Triangle was not coined until the 1990s by an author named Joseph Citro, but the terror began long before the maps had a name for it. To understand the mystery, you must understand Glastenbury Mountain. It sits at the heart of this region, a massive, brooding peak that seems to watch the towns below with a cold, indifferent eye. Long before European settlers arrived with their axes and their Bibles, the indigenous people of this region knew better than to tread too deep into its slopes. They spoke of a wind that could snatch a person from the trail, a place where the earth itself seemed to have a mouth, and where the very laws of nature felt thin. They avoided the peak, believing the land was cursed, a stone-filled wilderness that rejected human presence. For centuries, the mountain was left to the wolves, the shifting fog, and the secrets of the stone. But as the 1940s arrived, the mountain began to take. It started in November of 1945. Middie Rivers was 74 years old, a seasoned mountain guide who knew these woods better than his own backyard. He was a man of the earth, sturdy, calm, and deeply experienced in the unpredictable nature of the Vermont hills. He was leading a group of 4 hunters near the area known as the Long Trail, a path he had walked hundreds of times. As the group began to head back toward their camp at the end of a long day, Middie stepped slightly ahead of the others. It was a matter of yards, a momentary gap in sight between the thick gray trunks of the maple trees and the darkening pines. When the hunters rounded the bend just seconds later, expecting to see Middie's familiar silhouette, the trail was empty. Middie Rivers was gone. There was no cry for help, no sound of a struggle, no snapping of heavy branches or the crunch of boots on the frost-covered ground. Just the sudden, impossible absence of a human being. The search that followed was one of the largest in the history of the state. Over 300 local residents and United States Army soldiers from Fort Ethan Allen scoured every inch of the brush. They looked for a scrap of clothing, a footprint in the mud, or a dropped wooden pipe. They found nothing. The only trace of Middie Rivers ever existing was a single rifle shell found in a stream, as if he had reached into his pocket and dropped a single memory before stepping out of this world entirely. Some said he got lost, those who knew him knew that was impossible. On Glastenbury, Middie was the master. If he disappeared, it was because something else moved him. 1 year later, the mountain grew hungrier. Paula Welden was an 18-year-old student at Bennington College, the daughter of a famous architect. On a cold December afternoon in 1946, she decided to hike a stretch of the long trail. She was wearing a bright red parka, a beacon of color against the gray and white of the winter woods. Multiple people saw her that day. An elderly couple watched her walk toward the trailhead, her red coat glowing in the twilight. They saw her turn a corner on the path, just as the sun began to dip below the ridge. Paula Welden never turned that corner back toward the world of the living, despite an investigation that eventually involved the Federal Bureau of Investigation and a $5,000 reward, a staggering fortune. In 1946, Paula was never found. No red fabric was ever snagged on a branch. No footprints were found in the fresh, light snow that had fallen just after her disappearance. It was as if she had walked into a mirror and the glass had closed behind her. Her disappearance was so baffling and the public outcry so great that it actually led to the creation of the Vermont State Police. The state realized they were dealing with something their local sheriffs simply could not comprehend. Close your eyes and listen to the wind through the pines. These were not children wandering off. These were people who knew exactly where they were. Yet the triangle does not care about experience. It only cares about the moment you look away. And as the 1940s drew to a close, the mountain was only getting started, growing larger, growing bolder, ready to claim its next victim from a place no one thought possible. The mystery of the Bennington Triangle is not confined to the dirt and the stone of the mountain. It has a strange way of reaching out into the places we consider safe, the places where we are surrounded by people and the hum of machinery. In 1949, the mountain's shadow stretched across the highway, proving that even a moving vehicle could not protect a person from the reach of the Green Mountains. It happened on December 1st, 1949. James Tedford, a veteran in his 60s, was traveling by bus from St. Albans back to his home at the Soldiers' Home in Bennington. James was a man of quiet routine, a familiar face to the bus driver and his fellow passengers. There were 14 other people on that bus with him that afternoon. As the vehicle rattled along the winding, snow-lined roads that cut through the heart of the triangle, witnesses clearly saw James sitting in his seat. He was leaning against the window, his head resting back, perhaps watching the dark skeletons of the trees blur past as the bus climbed higher into the cold mountain air. When the bus finally pulled into its final destination at the terminal in Bennington, the driver went to check the cabin to ensure everyone had disembarked. James Tedford's seat was empty. His luggage remained tucked safely in the overhead rack. His bus timetable was still sitting on his empty seat, open to the page for the Bennington arrival times. But James himself was nowhere to be found. The bus had not made a single stop between the last checkpoint and the station. The doors had remained sealed against the freezing wind. The windows were shut tight against the winter chill. 14 passengers had been sitting in that small, enclosed space for the entire journey, yet not one of them had seen James stand up, walk down the aisle, or exit the vehicle. He had simply ceased to exist while the bus was in motion, as if he had evaporated through the glass. Extensive searches were conducted along the entire route, looking for any sign that he might have somehow fallen or jumped, but the road was a ribbon of untouched, pristine snow. To this day, James Tedford remains the ghost of the Green Mountain bus, a man who boarded a vehicle and arrived nowhere, leaving behind nothing but a piece of paper and a suitcase. The mountain waited only one more year before striking again, and this time it shattered the local community by choosing its youngest victim. On October 12th, 1950, 8-year-old Paul Jeffson was riding in the family truck with his mother. They had stopped at a nearby farm so his mother could tend to their pigs. It was meant to be a quick chore. She left the boy in the cab of the truck, well within her sight, and only a few yards away. She was gone for less than 10 minutes. When she turned back, the truck door was closed. The vehicle was exactly where she had left it, but the cab was empty. Little Paul was gone. What followed was a search of unprecedented scale. Hundreds of volunteers, local police, and experts equipped with bloodhounds descended on the farm. The dogs, famous for their ability to track a scent through even the most rugged terrain, picked up the boy's trail almost immediately. They followed it across a field and directly to a nearby crossroads. Then the animals stopped dead. They began to circle the spot, whining in a way that chilled the searchers to the bone, looking up at the sky and refusing to move forward. The scent did not lead into the woods. It did not lead down the road. It simply ended in the middle of the path, as if the boy had been lifted straight up into the clouds. Close your eyes and listen to the rhythmic falling of the rain. Imagine the feeling of a forest that knows your name, waiting for the one moment your guard drops. The triangle was no longer just a place of accidents. It had become a place of dark intent, stalking the roads and the farms of the Green Mountains. The final disappearance in the primary cycle of the Bennington Triangle occurred only 16 days after young Paul Jeffson vanished into thin air. It was as if the mountain had reached a fever pitch of activity, no longer content with waiting years between victims. On October 28th, 1950, Frieda Langer, an experienced 53-year-old hiker and survivalist who knew the local terrain like the back of her hand, was exploring the area near the Somerset Reservoir with her cousin Herbert. The weather was damp and biting, a typical autumn afternoon where the mist clings to the surface of the water like a heavy gray shroud, obscuring the horizon and muffling the sounds of the forest. While navigating the uneven ground, Frieda accidentally slipped into a mountain stream. The water was freezing, soaking her clothes instantly, shaking off the chill. She told Herbert to wait for her on the trail while she ran back to their nearby family campsite to change into dry gear. She was a fast, capable woman, and the camp was only a short distance away, a trek she could have done in her sleep. Herbert watched her jog toward the trees, her footsteps light against the damp earth. He sat on a fallen log, lit a pipe, and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. Frieda never arrived at the campsite, and she never returned to the trail. Despite Herbert retracing her steps immediately, he found nothing but the quiet, dripping woods. What makes Frieda's case fundamentally different from the others, and perhaps more terrifying, is the ending. Unlike Middie, Paula, James, or Paul, Frieda Langer was eventually found, but her discovery only deepened the darkness of the mystery. 6 months later, in May of 1951, her body appeared in an area that had been searched meticulously by hundreds of people dozens of times during the initial investigation. It was an open space near the reservoir, a place where it would have been impossible to miss a human form during the barren winter months. Even stranger, her body was in a state of decay that baffled the medical examiners of the time. It did not match the 6 months she had been missing. It was as if the mountain had taken her, kept her in a place where time moved differently, a pocket of reality where the clocks do not tick, and then placed her back on the earth once it was finished with her. Since 1950, the vanishings in the Bennington Triangle have slowed, but the feeling of being watched remains for anyone who dares to hike the long trail. Some locals still whisper about the Bennington monster, a hairy, wild creature said to roam the high peaks. Others, more inclined toward the scientific or the supernatural, talk of localized wormholes or thin places, pockets of reality where the veil between our world and something else is worn away. Whatever the truth may be, the Green Mountains keep their secrets well, buried under centuries of fallen leaves and the constant rhythmic drumming of the rain. When you walk through the woods and the wind suddenly dies down, or when the birds stop singing all at once, pay attention. That heavy, breathless silence is not always empty. Sometimes the silence is a predator waiting for you to turn the corner. Tonight, as the rain continues to fall outside your window, be thankful for the walls that protect you from the wild, dark places of the world. Thank you for spending this time with us at Hushed History. If these chronicles of the vanished have kept you company tonight, please consider subscribing to our channel and tapping the like button. Your support helps our library grow and ensures that these stories are never truly forgotten. Sweet dreams and stay safe in the shadows.